Okay, I guess technical difficulties with the document camera projecting, but we can skip that for a minute. Everybody have a card? Everybody have a, here you go. Pick a card, any card. All right. You could skew the results because I've decided we don't write on the cards anymore. We just pass them from one side to the other. I like that. I like that method. Then I get to keep reusing the cards. And I don't have to feel guilty if I didn't read what everybody wrote. Okay. Before we get going on today's lecture, I just want to review the group assignment just for a second. Let's see. What is this? I can do it. There's an assignment on Canvas. It should allow you to view everything and submit. But what it does is it links you to the instructions, which are at me1800.com. Oh, let's call it group assignment 3, search. I've never used the search function here. Look at that. This is the one we want to do. There's been other group assignment 3s. You don't want to do the other ones. You want to do this one. And the Canvas assignment links to this one. Group assignment 3. This is what we talked about Tuesday, right? So just to make sure there's no misunderstandings. We're going to estimate the cost of starting a manufacturing company to manufacture WPI ME1800 Stirling engines. We went through an example of how we would estimate the cost of starting up just to make the Y block on Tuesday, but what we want to do is make the whole engine, not just the Y block. I don't think you'd find a customer for just the Y block. Okay? So the company will be created to manufacture and sell this. You will determine the startup costs. You can use the assumptions from the lecture from Tuesday, which is below if you scroll down here, or you can make your own assumptions. If you make your own assumptions, you should document what they are. Does that make sense? Okay. You will need to project at least 4 years of operation, and you will have to assume the price point and the volume of sales over those 4 years. It does not have to be constant. In fact, you usually don't start out selling 1 million parts a week, right? Usually when you introduce a new product to the market, it takes some time for those sales to build up. You could go research. It takes some time for those sales to build up. You could go research how other people have modeled how the sales will increase over time. Or you can, I don't know, guess. Make it up on your own. Was it just not plugged in? Because I totally could have looked for that.
What's up?
Was it just not plugged in?
It was plugged into the wrong port.
That wasn't me.
That's all right.
And I probably wouldn't have found that one.
I'll wait for it to turn on, make sure it shows up, and then.
Okay, yeah, we usually project it onto this one so that it gets captured. Perfect. What are we doing here, though? You project 4 years. Company, your group is the company when it starts. So you guys had a group of 3, right? Some groups have a group of 4. I guess you have more labor. Your group of 3 has to work harder. You will take no salary for the first year. You may start taking a salary after the first year. You may decide not to. But just think about how hungry you're going to be when you decide not to. You should allow your investors to recover their investment by the end of the 3rd year, and also by the end of the 3rd year, you must begin taking a salary. If you add any employees besides your group members, so if you want to produce parts faster, you're going to have to hire people in order to do that. If you add any employees besides your group members, yes.
You said that you have to start generating your own salary after 3 years and basically invest your money. That's interest, right?
I was assuming that we had equity investors. If you decide to fund it with debt instead of equity investors, then yes, you'd have to pay back interest and do debt service and stuff like that. I wouldn't. So this is. So if I'm the venture capitalist and you're starting your company, I'm buying shares in your company, so I'm getting equity in your company. Um, in the belief that I will get my money back at some point. And so the profit, so now when we make a profit at our company, it's not all just going to you, the founder, because you have partners now. So that profit gets divided between yourself and the founders. You could decide to give the founder, or it gets divided between the founders and the venture capitalists, right? And so, but they like their money. But money's only good for giving it to other people. So they would like to get back. So we say it's going to take $500,000 to start the company, and you've got an angel investor that gives you $500,000 to start the company. Within some period of time, they want to have received back as profit from the company that $500,000, so that they can now go give it to another company. They want to continue to receive profit after that, though. So it's just about how quickly do you want your money back. Now, you could fund it all with debt. If you could find a bank that wants to give you the loan, and you could assume that you have some interest rate, and maybe you could assume that you're paying interest only for the first 3 years. Those kind of things can be negotiated with the bank. So if you do that, just document what you did. That part of it is not really the meat of the assignment, because our class is about the prototype manufacturing, right? The meat of the assignment is understanding the cost for that first part, so making sure you haven't left anything out there. And then the rest of it, you get to play a little bit with your assumptions with how you're doing this. In fact, let's get to the submit part, though, because that's the thing that actually gets you paid, right? Has anybody ever done any consulting work? You have? My primary source of income for several years was working as a consultant. And I learned something very quickly during that time. What's so funny? You guys were laughing. What was funny? Oh, he is. Check it out. When you work as a consultant, you do not get paid for knowing the answer. You do not get paid for telling them the answer. You don't get paid for figuring out the answer. You do get paid for sending them an invoice. Only sending them the invoice gets you a check back. My advice, if you decide to become a consultant, make sure you don't forget to send the invoices. All right, so you must submit a business plan no longer than 4 pages. I don't want to read longer than 4 pages. Your business plan should include your startup costs, so that cost to make the first part, and operating projections with a budget. Cost to make the first, so budget includes cost to make the first part, price points and sales projections, cash flow and profit projections annually, and here's the bill of materials. These are all the parts that we put in the Stirling engine. Steel wool is one of the parts. You guys know that? It goes in at the assembly stage. We've told you it's 25 cents for the steel wool per part. But all the rest of them, you can go look up the prices, or you can calculate the prices based on your knowing of the stuff. All right, so good. Due date. I was going to have it be due in a week from yesterday. I've decided, against my better judgment, to give you guys a little bit more time. But I think we have it due Sunday, the 7th? That's the last Sunday of the term at midnight. So you have an extra 5 days from when I initially intended for it to be due. The problem with that is what? You guys know about the 80-20 rule? Anybody ever heard of the 80-20 rule? We also call it Pareto's law. It's scientist, Swiss. Pareto was Swiss, I think. Swiss, what? Italian? Yeah, was he Italian or Swiss from the Italian region of? Anyway, but somewhere near there. I believe he lived in the Alps, and I'm not sure which side of the border. But you say Italian. We're going with Italian. Pareto is an Italian scientist, right? Do we break down scientists? Like right now we would say he's a physicist or he's a chemist, right? But if you go back far enough in time, you just call him a scientist, don't you? Yeah, he was a scientist. One of the things he figured out was 20% of the pea pods that he planted, the seeds that he planted, provided 80% of the yield from his crop in his garden. And then he started studying this relationship between 20% and 80%. And it's not always that. Sometimes it's 90-10, things like that. But he's found that throughout nature and throughout many processes, you'll see that you have this 80-20 rule. Where, I mean, what do we say now? We have 1% of the population has 99% of the wealth, right? You can actually extrapolate that down to the 80-20 levels and things like that. So if you apply this to project work, so let's apply the 80-20 principle to project work. And so I'm an engineer, so I like to make graphs. Does that make sense? Okay. So this is, let's say, motivation. Right? This, let's call this the deadline. And this is time. Right? So out here, we have a lot of time before the deadline comes. Over here, we have almost no time before the deadline comes. Now, I usually try not to start a project that I'm not a little bit excited about. So I think so this is the start time of the project. I get a little blip of motivation out here. And then it does this. And then it sort of approaches infinity asymptotically as it approaches the deadline, right? That's my motivation for completing the project on time. Anybody else have this similar experience for their own personal motivation? I don't think there's anybody that's an engineering student that hasn't felt this curve. So we can also, though, draw another axis here. And we will call this skill level. And it's really apparent. Because if there's a lot of time to complete the project, we still have time to figure out how to do it. Right? So we have almost an infinite, if we have enough time, we have almost infinite skill. But we'll notice that as we go along, the amount of time left to figure stuff out gets smaller. And we end up at some skill level that maybe was our skill level. But as we get closer to the deadline, our skill level goes down. In fact, somewhere around here, this may have been our incoming skill level. We may have been like that. But somewhere around here, as we're getting close to the deadline, we start making stupid decisions. Like, it's okay to stay up all night working on this because I don't have to think clearly in the morning, right? And so I like to say at this point here, where the two graphs cross, that's where a skill level, or it's where motivation has become desperation, when skill level falls below the time left to complete the project. So this is why I hesitate to give you more time. They say all project work will expand to fill the allotted time. But I want to give you more time anyway. I did hesitate. I thought about it. It was because of this rule. Everybody got a good feeling for the group project? It's not intended to be exceedingly difficult. It is intended to make you think about the costs that go into this. Now, I said if you hire people, you have to start paying them as soon as you hire them. That's because you're not giving them shares of the company, right? They're not co-founders of the company. That's clear. Why might you want to hire people? Yes. You can make the parts faster, right? Because why would you want to make the parts faster? So you make the money back sooner, right? So is it possible that you need more than one mini mill in order to make the parts in a timely manner? What do you think we should put some bounds? I told you to pick your price point, right? And your sales projections. What does this whole thing depend on? Yeah. Demand, right? We have no friggin' idea what the demand would be for this. Right? So we're making that part up. Let's put some bounds on the price point for this. What do you guys think somebody would maybe pay for one of these Stirling engines? Yeah. So we got $75. Anybody want to go higher than 75? Anybody think we should go higher than $75 for one of these things? Christmas time, grandparents will buy it. $79.99. $79.99. You can use some fudge factor there. What about the minimum price? Is there a good minimum price? Yeah. I guess next time I do this assignment, I'm going to have a curve for you guys that relates demand with price. Because if this is an elastic market, then there should be a relationship between demand and price. All right. So let's say that as price goes down, demand goes up. Okay? For some range. Let's bring this down to $45 and say that our demand increases, demand goes up by a factor of 50%. So if you could sell them at $45, you've got a 50% higher demand than if you sell them at $75. And we'll say that it's a linear relationship. I'm sure it wouldn't be, but it's easier to do a linear interpolation. That way you can pick your price point between 45 and 75 in order to figure out. And I don't know what the volume needs to be because I don't know what your cost is, right? Because you have some startup costs which you've got to pay back, and you've got some ongoing costs. So all right, so let's do a range of 45 to 75, and demand is 50% higher here. No, 50% lower, right? But at $45, we will assume that you can sell them as fast as you can make them regardless of your production rate. So yeah.
The demand when you're at 75
Is lower.
Is
50% lower.
As much as what it was at 45.
Yeah.
The other way around will make you different numbers,
right? Right.
Good.
If the demand keeps going up as the price point goes up, just keep raising the price. You'll make more money. And I don't know if that little bit of math is going to work out because we just did it off the top of our head. But it makes sense that there's going to be more demand at a lower price for this type of a consumer gadgety product. Yeah. Right. That sounds good. We're ready to move on. What's the cost of changing a light bulb? If one light bulb costs 99 cents and another one costs $6.99, the first one has a 10,000 hour life. The second one has a 20,000 hour life. Which light bulb should you buy? This is what the cards are for. You have a question? Both the same light quality. So you can't notice the difference in quality of the light. You have a question? What's that? No, you're just stretching. Okay. You have a question.
Is there a cost of labor or like convenience or something like that?
Which light bulb would you buy? If you want the cheap light bulbs, pass your cards over here. If you want the expensive light bulbs, pass your cards over there.
That's the lower one, right?
You guys done passing your cards? So pass them to the side and to the front. You got cards? Any more cards coming this way? One, two, three, four, five. Any more expensive cards? Five. This is more than five? This is more than five? Yeah. How many people in the room? 4, 7, like 30 people in the room? Maybe more? That's more than five? Okay. Stand up if you would pay $69.99 for the light bulb. Anybody? Yeah. Stand up if you would pay $69.99 for the light bulb. Yeah. For the good one. Same light quality. Life. Yeah. The same life as the expensive one. Nobody's willing to go $69.99? There's a number though, right? So you had a good question at the beginning. What was your question? And I totally just ignored your question and went on with what I was saying, didn't I? It was on purpose.
Are we paying somebody to do this? Are we?
Right, who's changing the light bulb?
Yeah, considering like our own convenience, like do we?
Yeah.
About having to change it more often?
So when I came up with this question, I, in addition to working here as a professor, I also own several residential real estate properties in the area here, a bunch of 3-deckers. I rented to students. I also was working as a consultant in industry. And when I started out, I bought my first 3-family house just after I graduated, right on Highland Street. And I just couldn't believe everybody didn't have one of these things. The first floor pays the mortgage. The second floor pays you, and you live on the third floor for free. Everybody should have one of these things. The math is easy. It turns out that the dynamics have changed because the market has changed now. But when I did that, everybody should have had one. You should have gotten a half a dozen of them. And so we did. But I was running the property business myself, working as a consultant at $2,000 a day, working full-time at WPI, teaching you guys. And I would get a call to change a light bulb in the common area, because I wouldn't change a light bulb in the apartment, but a call to change a light bulb in the common area. And I have light bulbs, but you may have noticed I'm not that organized. I don't know if you guys have noticed that or not, but one ME 1800 term I said, I'm going to appear to be organized to the students this term. About 2 weeks in, I realized I had to actually be organized in order to appear organized. But so I'd go out in the garage, I can't find the light bulbs, you got to go to Home Depot, get a light bulb. You show up at the place. Now they're mad at you because that light's been out for a month and a half and you haven't changed it yet. You're never there in the dark, so you don't know the light doesn't work. They haven't told you yet either. But you can't just yell back at them. You got to take them being mad at you. And you realize, oh, I need a ladder because it's in the atrium at the top of the stairs. You go back to the barn, get a ladder. You come back. And did I mention it was Sunday afternoon and you had a house full of guests? When I first started, I was pretty gung-ho and didn't really have any other responsibilities because it was before I took the teaching job here. And I would buy the cheapest light bulbs they had. And 14 cents for a light bulb, I'm on it. I'm buying the cheap light bulbs because light bulbs are expensive. You got a lot of them. I had like 30 light bulbs I had to, maintain. I don't know what the number was. But as I got more and more responsibilities, when that same time could be changing a light bulb. The cost of changing the light bulb, I think I figured out once because of the trip, and I don't think it was a light bulb, I think it was a toilet, but whatever. The cost of doing that job cost me $1,200 worth of opportunity cost. So if it was going to last twice as long, I'd pay more for it. So, all right, so that was my lesson about residential real estate. But what does that have to do with manufacturing? Yes. It might be the material, but the material is pretty much defined by the designer, right? So the material that your workpiece is made out of is picked by the designer, and you don't really get to affect that as the manufacturing person. What do you get to affect? The tools and the tooling is what you get to affect as the manufacturer in all of these cases. And so what we're going to look at today is the possibility of optimizing one of our process variables. So what are the main process variables in machining? You guys know this? We spent like the first 2 weeks repeating it over and over again. What are the main process variables in machining? Feed speed, depth of cut. Right. And if we assume that we can sell the parts as fast as we can make them, does this ever happen in manufacturing? Certainly does. They actually can't make them that fast. It certainly does. You can certainly be in a position. Now, you could, if you invested enough capital, you could increase your capacities such that you could make them faster than the demand is. But there's many times in a facility that based on, because we have these certain machines, right? We have this much space in which to put our machines. There's often times where you get in the situation where you can sell the parts as fast or faster than you can make them. And if we have that condition, then what we want to do is we want to optimize our cutting processes so that we could make them faster, right? Does that make sense? So if we could make them faster, we could make more money. Okay, that's our premise. So we believe that if we can make the parts faster, we can make more money, and that we can sell them as fast as we can make them. We have feed speed, depth of cut. And speed is surface speed. And feed, if this is inches per tooth or inches per revolution, as surface speed goes up, spindle speed has to go up for the same diameter tool, which means the feed rate effectively goes up. You see how they're coupled, right? Feed rate and depth of cut, if we're using inches per tooth, make up material removal rate, right? It's volume over time. So if we increase the material removal rate, we can make components faster, assuming we can't just buy smaller stock material. There's other ways to do this. But what we want to do, we say we've got to use this stock material. We've got to use that machine tool. What we can impact now is the cutting tool that we buy. So increasing the surface speed increases the speed at which the cutting edge moves through the workpiece material, right? What do we have to do over time that I said for our thing we could ignore for the startup with our tools and tooling? We'll have to change the tools out. When do you want to change the tool? How do you know you want to change the tool? Yeah. Maybe. If you need different tooling, then yeah, when you start a new process. But if you're just making the same part over and over again, there's a local Worcester manufacturing company that I've worked with several times. In one of their facilities, they've got 7 identical machines, all making the same part, all running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, making one part. So they're not changing their process there, but they certainly change tools quite a bit. When do I change tools? So what happens as the tool wears out? Yeah. The part geometry can change. The surface finish can change as the tool wears out. So remember in our turning experiment, if the tool wears out, the part's going to get bigger. When we looked at that at the beginning of the class. Same thing's going to happen if we're doing a milling. So say we're doing a side milling operation, making the outside shape of something. If as the tool wears out, the part's going to grow on the outside. The other thing that's going to happen is think of the shape of our tool here, our cutting tool. So if we have an end mill like this, and the depth of cut is always right about here, cutting through there, where's the wear going to happen? Who's had a stress class? Materials class, anything like that? So that sharp corner at the edge of the end mill is going to give us a stress riser. There's going to be a higher stress there than there is other places. So the first thing that's going to happen is that corner is going to go away on the tool. This is just normal wear. That corner is going to go away. You might even end up with a notch here, which now if you go to make a different part with a different depth, you're going to, and if you do different depths throughout, you're going to end up with a tool that's shaped sort of like that. Now I'm exaggerating it on the board here, but your tool's going to wear sort of like that, which is going to change the geometry of your part significantly, even beyond the surface roughness of the part. So what else happens when the tool wears out? Yeah. It may, although probably not measurably. I mean, it will because the tool's getting smaller, right? So it's not taking as much material. But you probably wouldn't notice that right away. So, but what else happens? Yeah. As the cutting edge gets dull, the force required to move the cutting edge through the workpiece material goes up. Power consumption goes up. Eventually, what happens when the force gets too high? Tool breaks. Force gets too high, the tool breaks. When do we want to change the cutting tool? Well, certainly before the tool breaks. But we like to leave that cutting tool in as long as possible, because what goes into the cost of changing the cutting tool? Yeah. So the cost of the tool itself goes into the cost of changing the cutting tool. Cost of the C of the tool. That goes into it. What else? The cost of the time the spindle is not running. Opportunity. Right, this is going to cost me $1,200 to change a light bulb, unless I had billed that time to somebody else already and then not been able to sell it, right? Unless I already had somebody who was going to pay $1,200 for that time, it didn't really cost. That was most of that was opportunity cost. What else? The cost of the labor of the tool change. What else goes into the cost of changing that tool? So we got the spindle not running time, the opportunity cost of the money that we could have made if we'd been making parts at that moment. There's also just the cost of the machine sitting there. So the cost of our machine as it's sitting there on the floor not doing anything, because even if we paid cash for the machine, that cash had to come from somewhere, right? We could have used that cash for something else. But in most cases, when they get a new machine in, they'll finance it. So they're making payments every month on that machine. Some part of that is allocated to the time that it's sitting there not working. So there's a cost of the machine sitting there. We got a there's non-productive costs that go into making the cut. What are some non-productive costs that go into making the cut? Yeah. Say again. So creating a program, yeah. The engineering, that's a non-productive cost that goes into cutting something. Seems sad, right? You guys know that you're a cost center for any company you go work for. As an engineer, you're just a cost that they would love to eliminate, except for one company that you could work for. One type of company. What's the one type of company where you're a profit center instead of a cost center? Right? A company that sells engineering consulting, and you're a profit center. Every other company you work for, you're a cost center. So, non-productive costs are things like engineering, the people, the janitors that sweep the floor. So that cost goes into this. All the overhead costs that the company has. What other non-productive costs go in? Putting the fixture in the machine tool. That's not a productive cost. That's a non-productive cost. What about assembling the tools? All those things. All the things you have to do before the tool starts cutting are non-productive costs. Then there's the cost of cutting. There's the cost of the time the tool is engaged in the workpiece doing value-added work. So there's the cost of cutting. There's the cost of changing tools. And we started talking about the cost of changing tools a minute ago, right? So the cost of the tool, the cost of the, and I think we break that out. We break that out separately here. And the cost of the raw materials. So that's what it costs to make that cut, that part. And you can add them all together. So the cost per cut for any operation can be broken down into these things. What we want to do now is say which ones of those involve the speed. Because not all of these involve speed, right? So the cost of the raw material has nothing to do with the speed at which we can cut the raw material. The cost of the tool itself has nothing to do with the speed, except a tool that can cut faster or last longer may cost more. And then the cost of changing tools. So we can minimize the cost with respect to speed. We can, one of the things we note when we look at tool wear is that if you take the tool life and the speed and you plot them on a log axis, you almost always get a straight line like this. What it tells us when you get this kind of a relationship in science is it tells us that there's usually a thermal thing going on. So when you get this kind of a relationship in science, it usually means that as you generate more heat, the wear goes up, the tool life goes down. And that is actually the mechanism that causes this to happen in cutting tools. If you study it with a whole bunch of different materials, same cutting tool, you'll see you get all of these different plots. So for a given cutting tool, a given material, you can figure out what's the tool life prediction based on changing the cutting speed. If you do that, you can optimize the equations and you cut out the things that don't have anything to do with the speed. My tool life is a function of cutting speed. You can plot that. And so you can see here, as cutting speed goes up, the cost of cutting comes down here. The cost of the tool and the tool change goes up as cutting speed goes up because you have to do the tool changes more frequently. If you plot both of those on the same axis, you can find a local minimum here, and that is the optimum speed at which to run that operation. Just think about making our Y block. So if we're making our Y block, how many operations could we do this analysis for? 3. Well, there's 3 setups. But how many individual cutting operations can we do this analysis for? We have the contouring operation. If we're doing the 3 setups, have an optimal speed to run at. Are you guys going to need to do this kind of calculation for your group assignment? At least for the first part. You could throw in some assumptions if you do. I mean, there's got to be tool there. You're going to use up those parts. We just make an assumption and say what it is. So would you use this kind of analysis on that part? Depends how many you need to make. In reality, what do people do in industry? Who does this kind of analysis? Well, only a person who just graduated from school. Because I guarantee you, when you are a young engineer, they're going to give you this kind of work to do, not the fun work. That'd be fun for you. But how do you know these things? You have to do experiments for some of them, right? Or the tooling manufacturer is not going to tell you, give you a copy of that curve for that tool and that material, unless you're buying a boatload of tools from them. I don't think this is true because I think they've started outsourcing a bunch of their tooling. Or there's a local Worcester company I know spends about $1 million a year buying tooling. There's an aerospace company I used to work with that when we were working together, they were spending about $1 million a day buying tooling. If you're spending $1 million a day buying tooling, they will share that graph with you. If you're WPI and you're spending $20,000 a year buying tooling, they're not sharing that graph with us. So it depends on the scale of manufacturer. But you're gonna think about an analysis like that when you're in that position where you've got 7 machines running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, making one part. You're not going to do this kind of analysis for small production runs. You're not going to do this kind of analysis for even medium-sized production runs a lot of times. But as engineers, you should understand the idea behind this. There is an optimal speed. You shouldn't always buy the cheapest tool because I guarantee that cheapest tool is going to have the lowest tool life. Yeah. But I do think it's almost always intuitive. Nobody's writing up the equations, solving for the logarithms, and doing that. And if you want to benefit your company, the company you work for, you want to be thinking about this. You might want to do some of this kind of analysis. We did with that company with the 7 machines. We did an MQP there. Where the MQP went in to try to understand. Well, they had 7 machines all with the same part number. So the same model number machine, but not all purchased the same year. And they had a wide variation in the cycle time for the same program. So the first thing I want to do is figure out why machine A took longer than machine B for the same program and the same part. What are some reasons that might happen? Yeah. Probably not. It could have been, but it was the same model machine, but it was sold in a different year, same specifications. Why might we have that situation? Could be weird, but really what it came down to is things like fixturing. The machine that cut faster had a taller vise. So there wasn't as much distance between the tool change height and the top of the part. So it could get to the top of the part faster. Small things like that. Each machine, because there's servo control, there's different tuning in the servo motor, so some of them would accelerate faster than others. They went through and they sort of identified all those problems, but they also ran this analysis on several of the cutting operations that they had there. And what they were able to find was that company was losing $1 million a year in production time maybe there's something unclear. You want to clarify with the group? Okay. So if you got a comment that says talk to him, you should talk to him. And there was at least one group that had some problem with they submitted what they thought was on time, but it marked them as late. And I think I fixed all those too. So there's like 5 minutes. That's within the grace window. I think I fixed all those. All right. We have so next week, lecture Tuesday, lecture Thursday,